The moment my name wasn't called, I knew something was wrong. We were all gathered in the conference room, the smell of catered pastries and too strong coffee hanging in the air. Our manager, Paul, was standing at the front with that fake smile he always used when he wanted to sound motivational. He started talking about hard work, dedication, and rewarding the people who go above and beyond. My stomach was tight, but I sat up straighter because everyone in that room knew I'd been working toward this promotion for over a year. I'd put in the late nights. I'd taken on the toughest clients. I'd trained new hires when no one else would. I had the numbers to back it all up. My sales were the highest in the department. My customer satisfaction scores perfect. This was supposed to be mine. And then Paul said the name. It wasn't mine. It was Ethan's. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. But the sound of applause filled the room, and Ethan stood up, wearing that smug half-grin that made my blood run cold. He shook Paul's hand like he'd just won a Lifetime Achievement Award. I forced a smile, clapping along with everyone else, but my mind was a storm. Ethan? The guy who spent half his workday scrolling on his phone? The guy who forgot deadlines until someone else had to clean up the mess? The guy who had once asked me to explain the same report 3 times because he didn't have time to learn it? The only thing Ethan was good at was making himself look good when the right people were watching. I'd seen it before, how he'd swoop in at the last second to present a project I'd done most of the work on, how he'd buddy up to Paul at office happy hours, laughing at every one of his bad jokes. He wasn't just lazy, he was calculated. After the meeting, people patted him on the back and said things like, "Well deserved." I kept my face neutral, even congratulated him when he walked past my desk. But inside, I was making a decision. This wasn't just about being passed over. It was about being cheated, and I wasn't going to let it slide. That night, I went home and pulled out the folder I kept on my desk, a folder I'd been adding to for months without really thinking about why. It had everything. Copies of emails where I'd fixed his mistakes, reports where I was the one who did the heavy lifting, notes from clients praising my work on projects that Ethan had presented as his own. At first, I'd kept them for my own sanity, proof that I wasn't imagining things. But now, they felt like something else entirely. The beginning of a plan. I didn't know exactly how I'd do it yet, but I knew one thing. If Ethan had taken what was mine, I was going to take something much bigger from him. And I already had the first step. I started by watching him more closely than ever before. Ethan had always been predictable, but now that I was paying attention, I realized just how easy he'd made it for me. He liked the spotlight, but he didn't like the grind it took to get there. If a task looked boring, repetitive, or difficult, he found a way to push it on to someone else, usually me. If a project was big enough to catch upper management's attention, he found a way to insert himself at the very last minute, taking just enough credit to look important without doing much work. So I stopped making it easy for him. The first time he tried to hand something off to me, I simply said, "Sorry, I'm swamped. You'll have to handle it." I kept my tone polite, but firm. His smile tightened for a moment. Then he shrugged and walked away. The second time it happened, I copied our manager on my reply. "I'd love to help," I wrote, "but I'm focusing on my assigned priorities. Paul, can you confirm who should take the lead on this?" That little line was enough to put the responsibility right back in his lap. Ethan didn't like doing the work himself, and it showed. He missed small details. He submitted half-finished drafts. And when clients followed up, he was slow to respond. I didn't have to sabotage anything. All I had to do was make sure no one was covering for him anymore. Meanwhile, I made sure my own work was flawless. Every report I turned in was clean, concise, and on time. Every client email was answered promptly and professionally. I volunteered for projects that no one else wanted, but that I knew would get noticed. Slowly, I could feel the balance shifting, not in obvious ways, but in subtle undercurrents during meetings, in the way upper management started directing questions to me instead of him. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. If I wanted his job, I had to play his game better than he did. That's when I started collecting. Every time Ethan made a mistake, I documented it. Every time he took credit for someone else's work, I made a quiet note of who had actually done it and when. I saved email threads, timestamps, meeting notes. I didn't keep it in the company system. I kept my own private record, stored on a personal drive. I wasn't going to let any of it conveniently disappear. Then, An opportunity practically fell into my lap. Our company announced a major contract pitch to a high-profile client, the kind of deal that could mean big promotions and bonuses for the people involved. Paul assigned Ethan as the lead, probably thinking he'd charm his way into sealing it. I was assigned as his support, which really meant doing most of the work while he got the credit. Perfect. For the next few weeks, I worked like a machine. Research, financial projections, tailored strategies. I built a proposal so airtight it could have sold itself. But this time, I made sure my fingerprints were on every part of it in ways no one could ignore. Data in my name, references to my client calls, even small touches in the visuals that match my previous work. Ethan, of course, barely skimmed the drafts I sent him. He spent more time talking about how he was going to own the room during the pitch than actually learning the material. And that's when I set the final piece of the trap. 2 days before the presentation, I sent him a final version of the proposal. Only this version was missing key sections. A couple of charts were outdated. One slide had incomplete figures that I knew would raise questions. It wasn't sabotage that would sink the deal entirely, just enough to make the presenter look unprepared. I, on the other hand, had the complete, polished version ready and waiting. The morning of the pitch, we walked into the boardroom together. The client team was seated on one side, Paul and a couple of senior executives on the other. Ethan started strong, smiling and making small talk, but the cracks showed fast. Halfway through, a client asked about the missing data on one of his slides. Ethan froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the silence to feel heavy. Then he fumbled through an answer that didn't make sense. When another question exposed an outdated chart, I saw Paul's expression tighten. That was my cue. Actually, I said smoothly, I have the updated figures here. I connected my laptop, pulled up the full version, and began walking them through it. The shift in the room was immediate. Questions started coming to me instead of him. The client's attention moved my way. By the time the meeting ended, I was the one they were thanking. Ethan smiled through gritted teeth as we left the room, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. And when the email came in later that day, client chooses us. Great work. I knew I'd just taken the first real step toward replacing him. After the pitch win, the atmosphere in the office shifted in a way that only I seemed to notice. On the surface, everything went on as normal. Emails, meetings, casual chatter by the coffee machine. But in the subtle undercurrents, things were changing. Senior managers started copying me directly on important client communications instead of going through Ethan. When strategy meetings were scheduled, my name was on the invites without his. Even Paul, who usually treated me like I was invisible unless I was fixing someone else's mistakes, began asking for my opinion in front of the team. Ethan hated it. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened when my name came up, in the clipped tone he used when he had to ask me for information. And the best part? I didn't give him any obvious reason to accuse me of anything. I was nothing but professional, smiling in meetings, thanking him when he did contribute something, and making it look like we were on the same team. But I kept building my case. Every misstep he made now stood out more because the spotlight wasn't entirely on him anymore. He missed a client follow-up? Documented. He handed in a half-finished report past the deadline? Documented. He presented outdated numbers in a weekly meeting? Documented. Each piece went into my private collection, carefully labeled with dates and context. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, a major internal audit. It wasn't unusual. The company did them once a year to assess department efficiency, project success rates, and leadership effectiveness. But this time, the department under review was ours. And as team lead, Ethan was the one responsible for presenting our performance to the executive committee. I didn't need to sabotage anything. His own laziness had already done that for me. All I had to do was make sure the right people saw the truth. In the weeks leading up to the audit, I subtly positioned myself as the go-to person for accurate, up-to-date information. If someone needed a file or clarification, I provided it quickly and flawlessly. By contrast, Ethan's responses were slow, incomplete, or passed off to someone else. I made sure my work was always polished, with my name clearly attached. When audit day arrived, the executive committee gathered in the big conference room. Ethan started his presentation, his voice confident, but his slides thin. The numbers didn't lie, deadlines missed, client satisfaction scores slipping, and several projects delivered late or over budget. That's when one of the executives, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen, interrupted. "Who handled the Anderson account projections?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, then said, I led that. But the team, that was me," I said calmly, sliding the correct, detailed report across the table. "I also handled the updated numbers for Q3 and the resolution on the delays." Her eyes scanned the report quickly, then she looked back at me. "This is excellent work. We'll need more like this going forward." It kept happening, question after question, and each time, I had the answers. Not just guesses, solid, documented facts. Ethan floundered, trying to redirect credit, but the room was watching too closely now. They could see exactly who was doing the heavy lifting. By the end of the meeting, Karen turned to Paul and said, "We'll need to reevaluate leadership structure here. This department has potential, but we can't have bottlenecks." Paul nodded slowly. Ethan kept his face neutral, but the flush creeping up his neck gave him away. 2 weeks later, the email came. Effective immediately, Ethan will be transitioning out of his current role. My name will be assuming responsibilities as acting department head until further notice. I didn't dance or cheer. I didn't even smirk when Ethan cleaned out his desk. I just shook his hand when he left, the same way he had shaken mine the day he took my promotion. Except this time, the smile was mine. He'd taken what was mine once. I'd taken everything he had, and I hadn't just replaced him. I'd made sure everyone knew exactly why.